Welcome back to Bleav in the Broncos on the Bleav Network. I am Patrick Chiotti. That is Bri Maestas. Bri, welcome back. Training rookie minicamp is over. OTAs are on the way. And then we get into the beautiful days of summer training camp. It's so good to see you. So happy to be back to talk about the Denver Broncos. How are you doing?
Well, Memorial Day is upon us, so a little bit of vacation time looming. I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk Broncos with you, kind of what our expectations are here this year. And I'm excited for it because there's no better way to set yourself up for success is to look into the future and try to, put a really high ceiling on it.
Exactly. We love high expectations in Broncos country. Everybody thinks that this team is going to be 17-0 until they're not. So it's always a fun time. Last episode, we talked about the Broncos schedule release, which is always a fun time. We are not going to do the schedule prediction episode. We're going to save that for a little later. But in this episode, we are going to start off our position group discussions, give a little projection of what we think these groups will look like, what does success look like for these rooms. But Bri, before we get into all that, there was a massive vote among the NFL owners this week, one that could have been potentially game-changing. We're talking, of course, about the Tush Push vote. The Packers submitted a revised suggestion for this rule that I personally hated. I did not like the revision. If you want to ban the Tush Push, that's one thing. The revision that the Packers did submit said that no offensive player can push the ball carrier at any point. So say goodbye to those 8-yard runs that get stopped short of the sticks, but they're still churning their legs. And here comes the 3 offensive linemen running down the field, combined weight of 900 pounds to push their running back past the stick. Say bye to that, right? Like that, it would have ruined a lot of aspects of football. The rule, however, did not pass the vote of the ownership group. They were 2 votes shy, apparently. So this could be coming. The Broncos, Bri, how this ties in, were one of the teams who voted to ban the Tush Push. They voted for this rule and the revision. What do you think this says about where the Broncos stand with this rule?
I don't understand the argument that I've seen come out in justification for or against, right? Is that the NFL is trying to become a softer version. I don't think that's necessarily the case here with the Broncos. I think it's a competitive advantage. If the team that you're facing, who is the reigning champs of the league, have a play that's near impossible to prevent, you would want any competitive advantage you could get as well. And I think it was just interesting to see even Broncos country attack the Broncos for being soft here. I saw it specifically only to gain a competitive advantage against the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, am I saying that's the right attack point for a play like this? No, because simply, although in jest I have said many a times ban the Tush Push, I'm simply sick of seeing it, right? Your argument has been, find a way to stop it, which is great, as I've seen teams attempt to do so and then be almost penalized for attempting to stop the play. So there needs to be the conversation, and there will continue to be the conversation of whether or not to ban, extrapolate out the fundamentals of the play, because then it opens up a huge can of worms on what you're allowed to, which you just touched on. Yeah. If that offensive lineman can grab that running back under his arm and basically run him into the end zone, does that count, right? The subjectiveness that would come into refereeing a rule like this really is why that revision went into place. At the original owners meeting, I think they had some wording in there that kind of left a little bit too much to the assumption point.
Right.
Are you able to pull? Are you able to olay the dude into the end zone? Like, there had to be a little bit of a revision because either party felt that there was not an ability to vote substantially on this rule. Now, I'm still in the camp of I hate this play for what it is and what it's been for the Philadelphia Eagles. So as you can tell, that's an absolute just dominant take on my part of being a hater. Like I am a pure hater when it comes to this play, because it's not something that a team has found, an opponent has found to be able to really step in the way, and no pun unintended, right? To be able to stop this play. Where does it come from when you're looking at QB sneaks, right? Like what emphasis is it on an individual's run plus a little bit of help through the front, right, as opposed to being completely catapulted over the pile? Like it's a really subjective officiating that would have to come down to it. And we can't really trust that in the era where the NFL still has part-time referees. If you don't have full-time crews that are able to go out there and have consistent messaging throughout the league, it's going to come into the same ways of tackling has gone, where, you know, one thing's a foul, one thing's not. It's not really upheld against the conferences, and it changes weekly on who your officiating crew is. So in the long-winded sense of the world, they had to make this decision for what they were. I'm actually surprised that it got the votes that it did, but I'm not against it. If the teams are tired of seeing it because they can't beat it, and that's why this exists. This is why they have the ability to vote on it, because if it's out of the league, then there's no longer this like delay of game entity where, you know, we're going to award the other team a touchdown simply because they're failing to stop this play in the very small lengths in which they're able to. What are you going to do? Throw another guy are you going to throw a defensive lineman across the board and smash? You're going to be becoming gladiators at this point. So I don't know. I'm sick of seeing it too, but how do you stop it, Pat?
So here's the thing is quarterback sneak has been a play since the dawn of time, right? Great way for you to, you know, win those short yardage situations, 4th and inches. We always see it get pulled out. Broncos used it multiple times, right? And they were very good at it. It's one of those things where, you know, offensive line coach, offensive coordinator, quarterback coach, all of these coaches have to come together and say, you know, how do we maximize this? Like if it's not working, right? If it's not working the way that we want it to, how do we fix it? They figured it out. And it's this crazy thing, Bri, called leverage, right? And the Eagles offensive line, kudos to their strength and conditioning department, kudos to their analytics department. I'm sure they have like sports scientists that they work with very closely. The way that their offensive linemen get off the ball on this particular play, it's nearly impossible because the low man always wins, right? You pair that with a quarterback that can squat damn near 700 pounds. It's almost like they don't need the extra guy to push him, but because there's that little, you know, loophole in the rules, which is, it's funny because I think I could be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure, at least up here in the Pacific Northwest, in Washington and Oregon, you cannot, the running back cannot push, you know, a ball carrier behind the line of scrimmage. Can't do it, right? You cannot push them forward. I don't think you can pull them. There's specific rules for this in both the Washington and Oregon football guidelines. So that's something that they've addressed, but it is still like hard to manage that for a referee. So I think that this is just one of those plays where the Philadelphia Eagles have figured it out. And how do you stop it, right? Like, well, I saw somebody say, well, you know, defensive players should be allowed to push other defensive players. They can't. You can already do that. Like, you can do that. You can't do it on like field goal and certain special teams plays because of, you know, certain rules that they've put in, but you're allowed to, you know, push your defensive linemen into, you know, the offensive line. So that's something that teams might start doing. We're seeing teams want to find bigger guys to put on the defensive line just to stop this play. And that's just what it's going to have to be.
Yeah, but you turn from like rugby scrum, right? Where you start loading each other on your shoulders, and a bigger defensive lineman sometimes means a slower defensive lineman, right? So like it just, you're sacrificing for one specific opponent. And I think that's why if other teams maybe started to do it, they're not going to be able to do it to the rate in which the Eagles are. Like, you're right. They figured out the special recipe for the special sauce. And I think we're all just a little bit envious at this point.
Yeah. They've got the personnel for it, and they've figured it out. They figured out how to do it better than anyone else in the league, and that's just it's unfortunate. It is, and I understand where teams want to say, okay, we can't do this, but then it's like, well, what if you call a QB sneak and the running back is coming up to block somebody and he accidentally puts his hand on the quarterback's back? Is that a flag now? Like it's a slippery slope. So I think that they're going to keep revising this suggestion and keep trying to ban it. I think it eventually goes next season. I think we go through this season and then it comes up again next offseason, and I think it eventually goes through.
It would have to be another revision that has something to do with lining up,
Yep. Like like you can't have, it's good. It's going to end up just being like behind the line of scrimmage. A player who lines up behind the line of scrimmage cannot use their forward momentum to push. And I think that's probably what the revision should be, just behind the line of scrimmage. Anything past the line of scrimmage. So that now includes like running backs that get stopped and the offensive lineman is running downfield. That would still be legal. But if a player starts behind the quarterback at the line of scrimmage, they cannot use their forward momentum to push the ball carrier upfield if they are behind the line of scrimmage. I think that's fair. I'd be all for that. But I think that eventually that will come down the pipeline. This next offseason, I think it's definitely going to be banned. If they were only 2 votes short,
imagine if you had the play that was the boogeyman of the league. Again, isn't
that what Jeff Lurie said? Isn't that what he said? He was like, I always dreamed of creating a play that like had to be killed by a rule. That's crazy. That's crazy. Bri, let's get into the quarterbacks. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of this episode. And we're going to start off this position group preview with a little clip from the one and only Kay Adams. The Up and Adams show had some interesting things to say about Broncos quarterback Bo Nix with Seth Wickersham, the author of American Kings, a biography of the quarterback. Let's take a listen.
There's a quality of Bo's that stuck out to you and sort of made him such a good match, maybe for the NFL and for really Sean Payton specifically in the Broncos?
Well, what I get into with Bo Nix is I have a lot of interesting insidery detail about the scouting process that led Sean Payton to want him. And it touches on a lot of things from, I don't want to give away too much at the moment, but like it touches on a lot of things from like analytics and Moneyball in the NFL to personality type. And I think that losing out on Patrick Mahomes was something that haunted Sean Payton. You know Sean very well. I mean, that has haunted Sean Payton's career, that he had his eye on Mahomes and that the Chiefs traded up right before he was due to pick him and got him. And I think that the scars from that led to him creating a system to evaluate quarterbacks that led to Bo Nix.
What is the quality of
Bri, those are some strong words. Those are some strong words from Seth Wickersham. Throwing Bo Nix into that conversation of Patrick Mahomes when it comes to just qualities, traits, that's an interesting matchup. And if you're not familiar with that story, what they're talking about, Sean Payton allegedly wanted to take Patrick Mahomes in that draft. Chiefs traded up before he could take him. And, he wanted him so bad and he did all this work on him. And then he missed out on him. And he said that that's been a regret of his. Does this mean, Bri, that Sean Payton views Bo Nix kind of on the same plane as a Patrick Mahomes, especially looking back at that whole draft process, Mitch Trubisky, versus Patrick Mahomes, and Mahomes fell to 10th? I mean, do you think that this means that Bo Nix and Patrick Mahomes are on the same plane in Sean Payton's eyes?
It would be hard to listen to that and not fall to the same conclusion, right? Seth does little to leave any grace from assuming that he's all but said that, that the fact that Sean Payton views Bo Nix very similarly, both intangibles and intangibles. He makes a very quiet, assuming statement when he says, "I don't want to give you too much here." You've already given us too much once you say that, right? You're alluding
giving us everything we need.
You have told us what we needed to hear and what we wanted to hear, honestly. So I want to caution with preemptively making that connection. But think about other quarterbacks who were able to avoid a sophomore slump in general, which I know we'll talk about more. Patrick Mahomes falls into that same queue of quarterbacks in their second year, having kind of a standout breakout year because of those intangibles, because of the high football IQ and their ability to just have a more maturity. He talks about the money ball and the analytics side of it. If your board work is good and you know how to read a defense, you're really not struggling to keep the pace of the NFL speed. Peyton Manning didn't see it. You've got a ton of other quarterbacks. There's an entire list of them. I think Joe Burrow is on that, right? Like there's a multitude of very great quarterbacks who have those skills, who just think on a higher plane, that end up doing well in their second year. And right now you're relating him to a Patrick Mahomes who's been ruling the AFC West for so long. Broncos country is going to be hard pressed not to say Bo Nix is going to be in that same caliber. What it really falls down to, and at the pit of the argument, is what would Sean Payton have done with Patrick Mahomes, and would it have been the same Patrick Mahomes that Andy Reid has been working with? I think that conversation alone is a slippery slope because it's all resistant to circumstances. And I also think that Sean Payton sometimes likes to say things that kind of elevate the conversation a little bit, because obviously in hindsight, plenty of teams probably had Patrick Mahomes somewhere on their board, and we're hungry for that talent. And now that you see it, you're shaking your fist that you didn't make that pull. Well, you didn't, right? Everyone else had the ability to move up. Hoping that he fell to you means he wasn't your guy. They didn't let that happen with Bo Nix. They went and got him. And I think that's what shocked everybody, is this must play out in a circumstance in where we're able to see a ton of growth and potential out of an individual who is at a more mature pace than the normal rookie quarterback, which I think is the perfect kind of wrap up on this conversation. Is do I think Bo Nix is going to be Patrick Mahomes? No, not necessarily. But I think there's something to say about who Bo Nix is at his character level, just foundationally, the skill set that he has, his maturity level, the way he leads a team. All the things that won him over with the Denver Broncos organization are the things that are going to bode well for him in the league as long as he has a career here. And that could be 3 years, and that could be 13. We just don't know what that looks like yet. So right now, Patrick Mahomes is seeing the prime of his time really come out to play. We won't know what Bo Nix really is until we've seen a couple more seasons from him, because we know what happens here. You have a Russell Wilson who does remarkably well when he's a rookie in the league, and then just sort of kind of exponentially falls down that hill. And I don't think you're going to see that necessarily with Bo Nix. He's right in his prime right now, age-wise, and I think we're going to see his football skills grow in conjunction with that.
Yeah, I think it was an interesting quote for me because it's looking at the physical stuff is fantastic. He can throw a football. He can read a defense. He can make the right reads in your offensive scheme. All that's fantastic, right? That's literally, that is the cherry on top of the quarterback evaluation. Can this guy lead a team? Is he a good teammate? What personality qualities does he carry with him? And I think that's kind of where I saw that of if the whole thing about Patrick Mahomes is true from Sean Payton's standpoint, and he really, really liked him, but wasn't willing to trade up for him. Flashbacks to the Bo Nix draft. Then maybe he's just holding his cards too close. Right. And some other team saw the things that he saw and decided to make that jump. Right. But if that is true, what that tells me about his approach to the Bo Nix draft and and the scouting process that went into that was very, very thorough from like the personality standpoint, not even so much just the football stuff. It's IQ. Can he retain information and give it back? Right. What kind of preparation work does he do on his own time? Those are the things that are not seen necessarily in press conferences, in one-on-one meeting. Those are things that you see play out on the field. And I think Bo's transition from Auburn to Oregon is a real testament to that. The work that he put in, and then going into the draft process, I think that Sean Payton was looking at something higher than what the other quarterbacks in that class had. And he was fine with Bo Nix where everybody else, every single analyst and draft expert and everyone else said, wow, this was a horrid pick. I cannot believe that they spent a top 15 pick on Bo Nix. I mean, he's proven them wrong so far, right? Now it's time to take that next step. So Bri, going into this season, we talked about, is he going to be in a sophomore slump? Is he on MVP watch? I don't know. Going into year 2 with the Sean Payton offense and a couple of new weapons, I'm feeling optimistic, but I want you to level out my optimism. I've seen some of the offseason like quarterback rankings. There was one yesterday where he was ranked 22nd. There was another one by a big football publication that had him ranked 19th, which 19th isn't bad. Tell me why I should level out my optimism on Bo Nix going into year 2.
I'm going to start by backing you up a little bit here, because we already talked about what he was, and you'll see where I'm going with this. Is we want to kind of temper our expectations for year 2, but only because it's not going to be the exponential jump that I think people are hoping for, right? So because of Bo Nix's ability to recall, right? You called that out in the last part of this conversation. What you're hoping to see is an improvement from next year, which is going to be taking into consideration processing speed, right? Year 1 is usually about learning, getting yourself up to speed, but year 2 needs to be about reacting. We talked about reading defenses. Are you seeing the blitz pre-snap? Are you changing the protections? Are you recognizing the disguise coverages that are out there to eat you alive and pressure you to throw the ball too quickly? And also his ability to push the ball down the field wasn't great. I don't know if it was by design or if it was from the comfort level that him and Sean Payton were working on, but that has got to expand. And that's where my worries really lay in general, because we don't know what we don't know yet. And until we see him doing that at a consistent level, you need to be able to stretch that field, and you have to force some safeties to back up. Yeah. We don't have the run game in place to be able to throw off defenses yet. And that's why I'm concerned. We didn't have it last year when we thought it should be mediocre to best. And now we really are at a question mark. So your year 2 quarterback behind a questionable center with a run game that really hasn't fully devolved means that you're kind of still a tell when you get onto the field. And at the end of the day, if you get close enough and you're able to have any varying form of red zone efficiency, we obviously know this is where games are won. I wonder if he can set the stage for touchdown scores. You don't necessarily just want to set it up for field goals. Yeah, because that's a slow death in the league. And I'm really worried about that not converting over, but that wouldn't be on Bo Nix's shoulders entirely. I think, as he continues to build the ability and excellence in just situational concerns, third downs and 2-minute drills, which we see he occupies at a high level. Right now, it's whether or not there's the pieces around him that are going to elevate him even further, because quarterbacks like Bo Nix are able to elevate the talent around him, which he was able to do in his very first season. That's what gives me a lot of hope for moving into 2025 and beyond. But do the pieces around him start to also rise with the tides, or Or do we get stuck with Bo Nix being like, and I do not come for me, Broncos country, when I say
manager.
Thank you. He could be relegated to that definition, though.
No.
But it's not a knock on Bo Nix. No. It's not a negative thing either. But if you don't have the pieces to start, everyone talks, well, we can do so much with the roster that we have in place. Yes. But the reason really good teams have really splashy star power is because that's what takes them to the next level. So we have to start thinking long-term goals wise is what are we going to put around Bo Nix that really gives him that competitive advantage so he has the opportunity to have explosive plays with like marked consistency. And so I'll just say in a very apprehensive way, I get your optimism, but there's another layer of there that's just like it's fuming a little bit.
Yeah. You bring up a fantastic point. Like, they were not very good at attacking the field downfield last year. Like they did at times, but there were a lot of misses and a lot of misses that they really wish they could have gotten back. I mean, I think of Troy Franklin's drop in the end zone against the Raiders. Like those are those big explosive plays that you need to be able to finish. And I'm really hoping that we see a more improved and more detailed quarterback within the pocket, especially when it starts to break down. That was one of the things that Sean Payton talked about during the pre-draft process was, he can work from muddled pockets. And then we saw it last year and it was kind of like, I mean, maybe like not really. So I think maybe seeing a little bit more of that. I think that the run game, if the run game improves, it should help them, right? Like you getting out of those 3rd and long situations. But then also like adding in a guy like Pat Bryant, Evan Ingram, who are really good stick chasers. And that's a term that y'all need to learn, stick chaser. Those are pass catchers that know where the sticks are at all times. 3rd and 5. Oh, I have to run this route at 4 yards. I'm going to push it to 5 yards. I'm going to push it to 6 yards. I'm going to get I know where the sticks are. So I think those two things, the run game and having stick chasers, I think those are going to help Bo Nix. I'm a little optimistic still, but thank you, Bri, for bringing me back down. The backups, Bri. We'll touch on the backups really quick. They bring back Jarrett Stidham. I think it's fine. Fine backup. He's been in the system now for a couple of years. This is a good thing for Jarrett and for the Broncos. And they also brought in during free agency Sam Ehlinger, former 6th-round pick of the Colts. We talked about him before. But Bri, I can't help but wonder. That if there's a certain quarterback that maybe gets released because he's in a very crowded quarterback room in the AFC North, that the Broncos maybe take a look at him. I'm, of course, talking about the flying Hawaiian Dylan Gabriel. I'm just kidding. We're talking about former Buff Shedeur Sanders. Now, there were some reports that said that the Broncos maybe were eyeing Shedeur if he went undrafted. None of that's been confirmed. But it would be an interesting place to be for Shedeur, working behind Bo Nix, working with Sean Payton. This isn't one of those things where, you're bringing this guy in for the media love and whatever. I think that this would be like a classic Sean Payton, I want to, a reclamation project almost, but not really a reclamation project. I see Shedeur as an uber talented quarterback prospect who just needs real coaching. He just needs real coaching from an NFL coach. If he gets that and he sits for whatever amount of time, you get him practice reps, you get him scout team reps, whatever, that is going to help him. And learning the day in, day out work of being an NFL quarterback. Yeah, his dad played in the NFL. That's fantastic. His dad was a cornerback, not a quarterback. It is a completely different setup. It is a completely different way of thinking. I want Shedeur Sanders to be successful in the NFL. I just don't know where that is at this point. Is it going to be in Cleveland? It could be, but I don't know. If he got cut, Bri, let's say they go through the preseason, they decide to keep Yeah, I mean, you have to keep Watson at this point. You can't get out of that. You keep Flacco because it's Joe Flacco. And for some reason, they choose to keep either Gabriel or Pickett over Shedeur. I think it would probably be Gabriel. I don't know why, but they keep those three guys. Shedeur's cut, and then Pickett's cut, let go. Would you see a world where Shedeur Sanders ends up as a Denver Bronco?
There are so many pieces to this statement that you just made that I know you saw my face change as it was happening. Where
I think fraud, Dylan Gabriel.
That didn't even offend me as much as you got to keep Joe Flacco because he's Joe Flacco, and I just felt my teeth like tense up.
He's in his prime.
How dare you? Even I can't even tell with a modicum of sincerity if you're being serious or not, which I thought we were good 100%. To know. Good to know. If I had to make the choice, Joe Flacco would have been off the team.
To the moon.
Just in all seriousness, I want to keep this very professional as I go into a very, what I find to be hard conversation riddled with a ton of puzzle pieces when it talks about the conversation of a Shedeur Sanders. Now, your whole point was whether or not the Broncos should take a look at that. When you're talking about 6th-round pick Sam Ehlinger, you're talking Shedeur Sanders, who, regardless of whether or not he was picked in the 5th round at 144, I think is still a better quarterback than Sam Ehlinger is. Then there's no offense to you, Mr. Ehlinger. It's Shedeur Sanders, and he's got a little bit more time under himself to be able to build upon. The conversation in itself, and I want to be respectful for all of the pieces that fall into place for this to even be a topic of conversation, right? Who would have thought that we'd be talking about the idea the Denver Broncos could possibly make a move, or any team could, to pick up Shedeur as a practice squad / bubble player. But it's quite the possibility. You said a very important word with a reclamation project, which could be seen as a negative, but we've seen Sean Payton do miraculous things quite recently with Zach Wilson, who knew that his job was to come in, learn as much as he possibly could in a system that was really built for him, and to be able to then go on and try to find success elsewhere after having a really bad run with the Jets, a very highly touted draft pick who ultimately ended up going where he should have. Is not the same story, but the same universe of the conversation is talented young players who ultimately end up in a spot that doesn't talk highly about their longevity in this league. I made the joke about what a career looks like in the not for long league, but it's quite serious. And more often than not, that falls into the same realm as what team you land in, what system is there in place, how they plan to use you, the weapons that you have around you, the ecosystem in the organization and the team in general, what your long-term odds are of getting re-signed, if you're going to get sat for another flashy draft pick that you're going to be up against. I mean, I could go on, but the conversation surrounding all of that is how we talk about quarterbacks in the league in general, how we rank them out through their first years with the rest of the 32 starting quarterbacks. Is we have this tendency to then judge them not only just for who they are as individuals at the quarterback position, but how they've performed in the set of circumstances. Now, if you were to put Shedeur Sanders into an ideal circumstance, I think you'd be surprised that you'd see even better than what he was able to put out in Colorado. That offensive line was not able to support his level of play, but he also has a play style that is a little bit of a surefire way to burn out quickly in the NFL. So if Shedeur doesn't land on a team that affords him the opportunity to shine and not necessarily flash in the pan, but I think you get what I'm saying, Pat, is just this explosion up front that slowly learns how to slow burn. I don't know if he's going to get that with the Cleveland Browns. And if he doesn't get the starting spot, what does that say about the entity of the Browns in general, right? A lot of speculation on whether or not the Shedeur Sanders pick was a executive decision and not a team staffing decision. And so I think that that's where you fall into the premise of if Shedeur gets picked up by another team who wants him to be their backup, I think that's the best case scenario for him. If it's the Broncos, That would be super interesting.
Yeah. And I think that would be an area where, Sean Payton is bringing in a quarterback that has tools. He's got traits, right? Like I said, he just needs the coaching. He just needs somebody in his ear that is going to be critical on him. And I can't think of, like, we're talking about, the Bo Nix, Patrick Mahomes comparison, right? The leadership traits, and who better to teach you from that point, right? You've got not one, like you've got Nix, you've got Stidham, right? Both at this point, they've played enough football to understand the position, but you also have Davis Webb. You also have Sean Payton, right? Both coaches now who are very good with working with quarterbacks. I just think that this would be a situation where, if the Broncos wanted to move on from Stidham for whatever reason, obviously you mentioned I would take him over Ellinger right now. No offense, Sam. But like, that's someone who you've got a young, cost-controlled backup quarterback who is still learning. Are you going to start him over Bo Nix? No, but you're going to sit him and he's going to learn. And if something happens, God forbid, halfway into the season or late into the season, and we need a spot start, is he going to be ready? I think that Sean Payton and the coaching staff would have him prepared and give him an opportunity. Man, how fun would it be to see Shedeur Sanders behind the Broncos offensive line, right? Like, he would have a good offensive line to work around. He'd have decent weapons, not the best weapons, but decent ones. And it would just give him an opportunity. And I think it would be nice, the Broncos fans would obviously love it. The Buffs fans would obviously love it. He's close to his dad again. Like, I think it would be an ideal landing spot for him. Do I think it's going to happen? I don't know. I don't think that the Browns will cut him, especially with Flacco and Pickett, competing for that. But those guys are also NFL quarterbacks at this point, and he is still just a rookie. So all that to say, if it came down to it, I wouldn't hate it, but I think it would be more of a learning opportunity for him. I don't want to use the word humbling, but that might be the right word to use, is a humbling experience. You're not the guy, and you have to accept that you are not the guy. I had to have this conversation with a freshman quarterback who's coming in. How would you feel about sitting 1 to 2 years, right? Like, would you be okay with that? Would you be okay with sitting and learning and getting your reps in that way? The answer has to be yes, right? If you want to succeed long-term, the answer has to be yes. So that is our quarterback preview. We will be back with our next episode featuring a very special guest. Luca Evans from the Denver Post will be joining us to chat about Broncos offseason moves and going into the preseason. So stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Bri, for joining us. Make sure you subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. Make sure you leave a review as well. We love to hear from y'all. And make sure you follow Bri and I on social media at Bri Maestas 303, at Patrick Chiotti. Go Broncos, and we'll see you next time.
Go Broncos.